The luckiest of all of us are those who own the world, but the world doesn't own them. The only asset I have in life is my time. That's the only thing that I come to this world with.
Happiness is the absence of unhappiness. Do you still believe that?
100%. We are born happy. The only way you can change that mood is to trigger a thought in your head that makes you unhappy. I started to work on what is now known as the happiness equation, and then I would take that very complex cerebral analysis of what happiness is, and I would show it to Ali. Then he would say whatever it is that I told him in 4 to 8 words that were all heart. And somehow that completely balanced me. Between me and him, I actually found something that works. And then he died. There is no way you can ever live without pain in your heart for losing a child. There's absolutely no way you're going to avoid that pain. Every single one of us is with pain. Every single one of us will lose someone they love. Death is part of life. It's just part of the video game. Life is what matters, it's not death. Okay? How you navigate this video game until you put your controller down too, that's what matters.
Today's interview is with Mo Gawdat, and this is one of the most incredible conversations I've had on camera. He was Chief Business Officer at Google X and now one of the best-selling authors in the self-help space. The books that he have created have combined sort of a computer engineering with a neuroscience sort of approach. And he talks about how to rewire the brain, how to hack the brain, how to work on productivity and work through difficult emotions, and just some of the most incredible work ever. And then we also have quite a deep conversation around AI as well. This, for me, this approach at looking at the way in which our behaviors are, our emotions are, from a computer science perspective was absolutely shifting. And I'm so excited for you guys to be able to see this. And if you want to follow up on Mo's work, there's loads of links down below, including his amazing movement that he's working on at the moment to try and get 1 billion smiles or 1 billion people happy. That is linked down below. Today's video, as always, was powered by Huel. I drink their Huel Black Edition, the one right behind me. It has 40 grams of protein, 26 vitamins and minerals, and some incredible slow-release carbs that help me just get through the day and do these shoots.
How I usually start these conversations is just by asking, if people don't know who you are, just to introduce yourself, who you are and what you're currently doing at the moment.
Okay. Mo Gawdat. I had 2 lives. The way I look at my story so far is I had one life that is sort of what the modern world asked me to do. So I put my head down, became a corporate executive, became an entrepreneur, made a ton of money, and in the process was very miserable. Like most people who dedicate their life to something that's not perhaps what they are, if you want. I had to search for myself through that journey. I mean, I worked at IBM and Microsoft and Google at the time where those companies were changing the world. At Google, I first ran half of Google globally for 7 years. And then I was Chief Business Officer of Google X, the innovation side of Google. Jobs that everyone dreams of having, if you ask me. And lived that life fully, but then somehow was given another lease of life, if you want, unfortunately through loss. So around 10 years ago, my wonderful son, who was 21 at the time, was diagnosed with a simple appendix inflammation. And yeah, it was supposed to be 4 minutes in the operating room. It ended up being 4 hours, and then we lost him. And when he left, I think basically life was saying enough. Start doing what you're supposed to do. And so I attempted to write my first book to summarize what we learned together, me and him, about happiness, Solve for Happy, which was a massive success, massive hit. The book was for a mission that I called 10 Million Happy at the time. It was an attempt to get what Ali taught me to spread to 10 million people. And through my mathematical brain, I thought that if we get to 10 million people through 6 degrees of separation over 72 years was my accurate calculation. A tiny bit of his essence will have spread to everyone on earth, which was a beautiful, beautiful ambition and beautiful dream. And somehow we got to way more than 10 million in the first 6 weeks. So we don't count the people that get a message. We count people that act on a message. And you know, I think it was week 6 here in the UK. We had Channel 4 in the UK was interviewing me, and bizarre story. But anyway, the end of it is that you know, there was that little clip that became super viral, 87 million views in the first 3 days, which became by far like double as much as the biggest clip on Channel 4 until then. And then it went global by you know, by a few weeks later. We had probably 180 million views on my happiness content at the time. And you could see people taking action. And the action we were asking for was to either invest in your own happiness or invest in another person's happiness. And you could see people doing that. So basically, I immediately decided to quit my job at Google. It took me around 8 months to get out of Google, but then basically dedicated the rest of my life and work to what is now what I call 1 billion happy. So I'm an author, a speaker, and someone who wakes up every morning and tries to make people happy. Couldn't ask for better, to be honest.
Wow, I love it. You know, there's a lot. There's a few points I want to break down on that. I just wanted to say when we first started Mulligan Brothers about 10 years ago, the mission has always been to inspire change. That's not specifically like mentioning happiness, but it was to inspire change, positive change in people's lives. And the number was 1 billion. That's where we had that, yes. And it's probably on the website and somewhere, which I thought it's quite cool that it, I knew that after obviously doing some of the research. But one of the things I'd love to talk about, and it might feel a little bit alien to what you typically talk about, but a large portion of our audience is in that stage of their lives where they are pursuing the old career that you had, you know, what you were striving for back then. And I'd love to talk about that now. And then throughout the rest of this conversation, we could sort of strip that back a little bit and talk about sort of the opposite side of that. But back then, when you started to achieve those goals, what did that mean to you, you know, and what sort of frame of mind were you in trying to get to a company like Google?
Would you believe me if I said I was never trying? So my wonderful daughter always tells me I've been paid in advance, which really, really summarizes. I mean, I can easily tell you, other than the loss of Ali, I'm probably the luckiest person you've ever met. I don't know if luck can be seen as like coincidences that happen out of nowhere, but I think life will throw you a lead, if you want, when you're ready. And some of us observe the lead and act upon it, and we call them lucky because they've seen it. But I have always been sort of guided to the places I have been, I found myself in. I think the example that summarizes it very, very clearly is Google. Okay, the reason I joined Google, believe it or not, is I was at the time the head of the telecom sector for emerging markets at Microsoft. And my head of Eastern Europe was a German gentleman who is a wonderful guy who just had a child and wanted to stop traveling across Eastern Europe. So he asked me to help him get a job in Germany. So I spoke to the head of the country manager of Germany, and I recommended him very heavily. And so they basically decided to hire him as a sales manager for the German business. And listen to how life works. Huh? I'm sitting in front of him in a sales conference somewhere, I think Rhodes, if I remember correctly. I get a call from the head of Germany saying, I just wanted you to know before I tell him that we've chosen him. So I said, he's sitting in front of me. So he said, oh, that's wonderful. Why don't you tell him? So I tell him, he picks up the phone, calls his wife, says, I'm so happy. I'm not going to be traveling anymore. I'm going to be spending time with you and my child. Everything's wonderful. He hangs up. He gets a call from a headhunter trying to hire him to head emerging markets for Google. for Google. So he basically responds by saying, no, I don't want that at all. I've just got exactly what I want, right? But I know the right person for you. And he hands the phone over to me, where I go like, no, I'm not interested. And she goes like, are you stupid? I kid you not. I mean, Agnieszka is still one of my best friends today, and she was the headhunter for Google at the time. And she goes like, are you stupid? I'm giving you the opportunity to work for Google. And I said, well, I think you caught my attention, but I really am happy doing what I'm doing. So she said, maybe you'll be happier. Why don't you go interview, right? And then decide. And if a lot of people will tell you, oh yeah, I made it. I was the head of Google, right? I didn't. I was stupid. I mean, literally, I was even spotted as stupid. But luck wanted me to be in a specific place. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that. The thing is, when I went to Google, I worked my backside off. No denial on that. But again, you have to understand that if you really look at life as all about you, okay, you're going to have to battle through life to get to where you want to be. If you look at life as part of you and that you have a role in life for you and for others, life will tap you on the back and push you forward. Okay? And when you're stupid and you want to take different directions, life will even participate by giving you someone that says, no, you're not listening. Okay? And I really, really think that anyone who sees it any other way is arrogant. Okay? Because I know so many people who have succeeded in life. And I'll tell you, hands down, okay, they were handed over opportunities and they spotted them and acted upon them. Nobody creates it from A to Z at all.
Wow. Just to speak to the achieving it though, once you started to, I guess you weren't, like you said, you weren't aiming there or striving for that, but once you started to get the material benefits, your career, you were starting to get the accolades and probably highly regarded in your, sector, in your space. To sing to that for the people who watch that, who want that, what was that like? Like, what was that moment like?
So some of us get lucky and get a lot of money and a lot of fame and a lot of fancy toys and, beautiful partners and whatever. And these are the cursed ones, okay? Believe it. As long as you associate with those things, no amount of them is enough, ever. Okay, you could have the most beautiful partner on earth, and you'll still look around and say, but she's too tall, or she's too short, or she's too this or too that, or I haven't tried this and maybe that, and right? You could have, a beautiful, fancy, amazing car, and then go like, but I want a hatchback, and I want this, and I want that, and right? And some of us get luckier, if you ask me, where I say most people would not actually be able to say those things don't matter until they've tried them. And I acknowledge that, okay? But some of us try them and get addicted to them, and then they spend a lifetime chasing something they don't need. And some of us try them and go like, it's not really what I wanted at all, okay? And they stop, they reflect, they suddenly say, you know what, I could be with a different person every evening, but I'm missing something. I'm missing genuine deep love. I'm missing a connection that is replaced by junk relationships, if you want, that are shallow. You could get the ability to buy reasonably nice clothes and look good in life and so on, but then because you care so much about that ego and that image, you start to chase more and more of it. And then one day you're bald and fat like I am, and then you no longer look amazing. Okay? I never did anyway. But you see, the idea is if you're associated with that, your ego works against you. Your ego shreds you to pieces. Okay? Because if you care so much about being ripped and being handsome and being this and being that, one day that goes away. So the luckier ones of us actually get some of that, but lose the appetite for it. Okay? And I have to admit, I don't know how to say this. There was this fable that they teach in my part of the world about someone that goes to the scholar that teaches religion and spirituality and goes like, you're the teacher for all of us. Tell me the secret of happiness. And the scholar says, I'm sitting in a very simple place on a simple mat. He says, no, I'm not the best person to teach you this. You need to go to my friend and he will teach you. And so he goes to his friend, and his friend is living in a massive palace. Everything is gold, marble everywhere. And he refuses to meet him. Okay. And so he goes back to his scholar and he says, so what are you saying? The secret of happiness is to have a palace with marble? And he said, no, the secret of happiness is that my friend has a palace with everything in it. But if he lost it all tomorrow, he wouldn't blink. Okay? I have this mat that I'm sitting on, and if you took it from underneath me, I will kill you. Right? It's that attachment to things that tortures us. Okay? It's that attachment to images, to promises of the modern world that truly tortures us, believe it or not. So the luckiest of all of us are those who own the world, but the world doesn't own them.
Yeah, I love that. Les Brown, a motivational speaker, I don't know if you've heard of him before. He says, money doesn't buy you happiness, but everyone wants to find out for themselves.
100%.
And yeah, I completely agree with that.
But money buys you happiness in many ways.
Yeah, I think that idea of like taking that survival away from you is a massive one.
100%. So my money will always buy you happiness as long as you need it. Okay? Beyond that, it will buy you toys, or it will buy you human connection, which is really interesting. I'm not saying buy you human connections as in gold diggers trying to take it from you, okay? But buy you human connection in terms of you can act, if you can have the money and have within you the ability to connect to those who don't, your money will go to places that will make you the happiest you've ever been.
You guys know how much I love Huel. This is the best introduction into Huel in my opinion. It's their protein bundle, which makes a great Christmas gift. Huel have just sent me one of these, and I want to show you exactly what's in it. 8 bottles of the ready to drink in every single flavor. This is my absolute favorite. You get one of their standard shakers, Huel protein, and Huel Black Edition, my absolute favorite. 40 grams of protein, 26 vitamins and minerals, and slow release carbs to give everything that you need to get on with your day. Huel are doing exclusive offers right now. So if you check out the top pinned comment and use the link in the description, you can get exclusive offers from discounts to free t-shirts, free shakers. And if you use their subscription service, you get 10% off every single order. So go to the link down below. Thank you, Huel, for supporting this video.
One of my personal experiences, the first business I ever ran, I ran it purely to buy, this was the image I had as well, to buy a Bentley. It was a gym.
Which one?
A Continental, I think it was. And it was a...
Good choice.
I wanted this like beat up Continental just for the status symbol, of having this nice car. And then I had a tragedy in my life and I realized all materialistic. There was no purpose behind the business. And there should have been, because it was a great community of people. And I had this huge change in my life. And we started this. This is how we did it. And when I was listening to your story, you had this inflection point in your life. I'd love to hear that story, just about where you were before that, like where your head was before that, and then the just drastic change afterwards and how quickly that happened.
Yeah, so my story centers around my son quite a bit, because the reason I became so focused on success and started so many businesses and, made so much money in my corporate career was because of him. And my daughter, of course. But, when he was born, like a good father, I was in the operating room. And I will tell you openly, I don't really like kids. I mean, until today, I think they're very, very cute when they're a little far away from me, right? But they love me. And it's really quite quite a test if you think about it, because dogs and kids love me. And I sort of like, can I please have my space, right? But when I saw that child, I promise you something very unusual happened, because I loved those 2 children, him and his sister. I just could not understand what was happening within me, right? I don't get fascinated by the cuteness of kids. And my kids, Ali was so pruny when he was born, right? But I just loved him. And I felt within me that if I had a purpose in life, it would be that he, and a year later, his sister Aya, would never need anything, that I would work my butt off to provide for them. And actually, a lot of fathers are misunderstood because, there is a very interesting difference between being a father and being a mother. So being a mother is all about providing love and nurturing and caring for the child and being close to the child and so on. Being a father actually means being away from the child. Basically, you're trying to support that family, and that gets misunderstood because then you're away, right? And when you show up, normally you show up with your masculine energy, with a little bit of tough love, and everyone goes like, "Ugh, come on, man. Like, why are you not like his mother?" Because he has a mother, right? In any case, when Ali showed up, I started working my backside off. I completely jumped into work. And then when we managed to take Ali to the best school or the best kindergarten at the time, and then a year later, we couldn't take Aya to the same school because my salary at IBM wasn't sufficient. And so that was another kick where I completely ran like crazy to provide for the two of them, okay? Funny though, you never really see the inflection point. And the inflection point is that there was a point, probably 3 years after, 4 years after they went to school, where I had all the money in the world, okay? And I really didn't need any of that, but I continued. And because I continued, and because I had now joined my executive season of my life, managing people and looking at businesses and making decisions that were, millions of dollars every day and so on, I ended up finding myself critical of everything, bitter about everything, very unhappy about everything. And so, interestingly, I had all of the money in the world, all of the fancy cars in the world. At the time, I had 16 cars in my garage, including 2 Bentleys at the time, and I was miserable, right? That is probably the most interesting part of side of misery, because if you're miserable because life forced something on you, you sort of can blame that thing. I was miserable and I had everything, okay, and that gives you a sense of despair that you're not able to get out of that misery regardless of how much money you pour on it. And the modern world promises you that money will get you out of it. Go on a nice vacation or, buy a fancy car or whatever. To find my way out of it, I had to have a wake-up call. And my wake-up call was Aya, my daughter at the time. Aya was 5, and she came to me on a Saturday morning, annoying, busy executive, sitting in my office at home, looking at emails or watching numbers or whatever it is that I used to do then. And Aya's jumping up and down and very, very excited that we're going out and we're going to the movies and we're going to have popcorn. And, "Papa, can I also have ice cream with the popcorn?" And I looked at her and I was like, "Can we please be serious for a minute?" "What's serious?" She's 5 years old, okay? And she looked at me, and I can never take that look out of my mind and my heart. She looked at me with such a broken heart, and that happy face turned into tears. And for the first time, that was enough to wake me up that my misery was hurting the main reason why I did everything that I did, okay? And I found myself crying. I didn't cry that much then. I cry all the time now, okay? But I found myself crying, and I found myself making a commitment that I will change. And oh my God, it was so tough, because I just couldn't get it. All that I found about happiness, about calm, about peace, about contentment was in spiritual books. Okay, at the time, remember, I'm an old man. You could barely get someone that will talk to you in a way that is anything other than the older scriptures, the practice, the yoga, the meditation, the chanting. And none of that registered for me at all. At all. Most of it actually doesn't still, right? And it's quite painful, because I put in the effort. I watched every documentary that was available. Probably there were 3, right? I read every book. I attended every course that told me I was going to be happy. I couldn't get it. Until one day, I remember vividly, I was at Microsoft at the time. I was in Seattle in a cafe somewhere, and I'm listening to, my iPod at the time, 50 songs on the iPod. Or I don't remember, maybe a CD player. I don't remember. But anyway, I'm listening, and I listen to Supertramp. You don't know them. Tell me you don't know them. And Supertramp had a song called The Logical Song. And it starts by saying, when I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful. All the birds on the trees were singing so happily. Truly, everyone's childhood, unless you're in an abusive family, as a child, everything seems to be happy, right? And then the song turns and says, then they sent me away to teach me how to be sensible, logical, responsible, practical, cynical, critical, and so on. And that's really the story of my life, story of everyone's life. You're happy by default, you're born happy. And then they send you away, and they teach you how to be fit for the modern world. And so you become fit for the modern world. You score well in your exams, you sit silently in class, you start talking about nonsense synergies and three-letter words, and you just repeat what you're told, and you lose your ability to find happiness. And that really hit me. It really hit me that I actually was not defective, that I actually had a moment in my life where I was very, very happy. Okay. And in my software code mind, I thought, okay, so there is a bug in the code. Something changed along the path. Okay. And I can work on that. And so basically, I started to work on what is now known as the happiness equation, which at the time was a lot more complex than what I published. It was 19 different parameters with logs and, so cosines and constants and so on. And then I would take that very complex cerebral analysis of what happiness is, and I would show it to Ali. And Ali would look at me. Ali was so wise, Habibi, he was so wise. So he would look at me, and he, at age 8, he would look at me and go like, oh my God, that's so smart, Papa. Like, he's entertaining me, really. And then he would ask me a couple of questions, and then, just to entertain the conversation. And then he would say, and I quote, he would say, you could have just asked me. Okay. And then he would say whatever it is that I told him in 4 to 8 words that were all heart, 100% heart. And somehow that completely balanced me. Between me and him, I actually found something that works. I knew in my cerebral approach, mathematical approach to life, the algorithm that caused happiness or unhappiness. And then I found through his practice a model that I can actually implement. Put the two together, and then I became the happiest person, Like, honestly, until today, it's shocking how calm and contented and grateful for life I am, even in a year like this. This has been the toughest year of my life. And the reason simply is because I could manage to bring those two together, the heart and the understanding, the mechanical side of the human machine. And then he died. Honestly, the way my publisher on the first book put it was like, this is the biggest test of the model. Like life was testing me to find out if I learned. No, I don't think it was. I think it was my wake-up call. It was my assignment. I think Ali left because I was that very successful executive in the fast lane, unable to notice how much difference what we discovered could bring to the world. And so I wrote the notes for Solve for Happy in 2011. And I said to myself, I'll sit down and write it. And then I went to work, and I closed another $1 billion deal here, and I signed another this, and helped develop another product, and completely forgot about it. And then it would nag me a year later, and I completely forgot about it, and so on. And I think in a way, life decided enough. You have a role to play. And it's quite funny because most people that I know who have found a path to an important purpose, if you want, found it through hardship. And it hurts me because, years after losing Ali and understanding how life actually works, hardship only happens when life wants one of two things for you. It wants you to either learn something different, something that you're missing, something that will complete your path or your role in life, or it will want you to change direction. So life sometimes will tell you, hey, do you want to take a left turn here? And you go like, no, not interested, I'm going straight. And then life goes, but it's important that you take a left turn here. It's not all about you. And you say, no, I'm not. I'm just going there. And then eventually life nudges you, kick, a shoulder kick, and says, we need you there. And I really, really have to say, I was born in the East, infused with Eastern traditions and spirituality and so on. And then I grew up in the West, and I learned in the West, and I worked in the West. And I think it's the bit that the West misses most. It's, the biggest values in the West is individuality and freedom, which are wonderful values, okay? It's like the individual has the freedom to do anything that they want. The East, the biggest values are the community and respect. And these are so, diametrically opposite. The reality is, and my dad one day just taught me something that really stuck with me. He said, your freedom ends at the line where the freedom of others is crossed. Okay? And really hit me so hard, because in reality, I don't think the West sees that. I think the West will always prioritize the individual, even if the freedom of the individual hits the community at large. Okay? And of course, the East, by the way, by prioritizing the society, misses on the individual quite often. And the line in the middle is actually really an interesting balance. But you can see that the first 25 years of my life, my adult life, were completely dedicated to my selfish me. And life was like, it's not just about you. And you little selfish bastard, we've paid you in advance. We've paid you way more than you deserve. Okay, I'm an Egyptian, born and raised in Egypt, public school, public university in Egypt, not supposed to be chief business officer of Google X. It doesn't happen that often, to be honest, right? There must have been 100,000 qualified executives in the US at the time when I joined Google X that were more qualified than I am, right? And you really have to suddenly understand that if I was a grieving father writing Solve for Happy, no publisher would have ever published it, okay? The reason they published Solve for Happy is because I was the grieving chief business officer of Google X writing about happiness algorithmically, okay? That role of being, of appearing at Google X was enriching for me, but it was life preparing me to say, hey, we've paid you in advance. 16 cars is way more than enough, okay? So wake up and understand that the pain that you now feel as Ali left is a pain that's shared by billions of people, okay? And you worked through it. When Ali left, I was so calm and so peaceful. It even shook me, okay? So life was simply saying, enough being selfish, enough. Like, wake up, you have to go left. We want you to be there. And when you follow that, amazing things happen. Believe it or not, I've never felt more rewarded. I've never felt happier. I know it sounds really weird, but I lose Ali, and you lose someone that you love. It never goes away. Just I hope none of our listeners ever goes through the pain, right? But I've never been happier, and it's really quite shocking. It's quite shocking because somehow that combined life story, including the loss of happiness of Ali, is actually worth it. Is actually worth it.
Why do you think you reacted that way? Like, why do you think you had that peace?
I think there are multiple reasons. One of them is definitely my spiritual view of death and life. Okay, And I'm not the kind of guy that will believe in the fables and the legends. At a very young age, I was born in Egypt, as I said, and Egypt is a very conformative Muslim community. And when you're in a religious community, you're expected to sort of behave in a certain way your whole life. And I was different. I basically told myself, I don't mind. I think there is a lot of beauty to not cheating on your wife and not stealing from the other guy. Some of the stuff that religion advocates is wonderful. Okay, but if you're going to ask me to conform, I might as well go beyond faith into actual analysis and knowledge as per what I understand, which is the scientific method. Right? Now, the problem with the scientific method is it doesn't capture things like the divine or death, because these are not measurable in the physical world. So at a very young age, I said, look, if I'm going to be religious, then I might as well verify if there is something beyond the physical form. And at age 16, I did what I now refer to as the mathematics of the divine. And I published that in Solve for Happy in chapter 14, which basically gives me a very, very, very not emotional view of what's beyond our physical form, but a very highly likely scientific view. Notice, you cannot prove with science what is not physical. Okay? Because the scientific method will tell you if it's not measurable and observable, it doesn't exist. Okay? Of course, this is probably the wrong way of looking at the scientific method. The scientific method should say, if it's not observable and measurable, it's not the concern of science. It's the concern of other disciplines, spirituality, philosophy, and so on. Right? So you cannot prove for or against a divine being with science. Divine being is theoretically not a physical being. But you cannot also prove for or against it with fables. Okay? When you cannot prove something for or against, the discipline in mathematics that we use is called theory of probabilities. Right? What's the probability of it being this or that? So I did mathematics of the probability of evolution and natural selection creating everything that we have today versus the probability of intelligent design. Okay? And maybe this is not the day to talk about it, but I think the probability of evolution and natural selection is true. It exists in our physical world as a method of intelligent design. Okay? A bit like, Audi had the Quattro, then the Audi A4, then the Audi 8.8, and then the R8 and so on. And you look at them and you go like, oh my God, Audi evolved, right? And yes, some components from this is used in that, but no two Quattros ever married and got an A4 out of them, or Audi 80 out of them, right? And the truth is, if you really think of the possibilities of your iPad happening through evolution and natural selection, it would be quite odd. Okay, so I wrote in that chapter. I basically said, look, I don't use iPhones. I don't like iPhones, but I said my iPhone is, it wasn't made by Apple. This machine was found in the garden behind my home. The sand melted into proper microchips that fell on a circuit board where the copper fell in the exact right places. Somehow an earthquake shook all of this into an aluminum box that was milled through years of sand and wind, and then other bits of sand melted, made glass, and broke exactly to fill the gap. Right? And the operating system was written on a computer that happened the same way in my neighbor's garden. Right? And if you want to believe that, go ahead. Okay? But there is, by the way, a mathematical possibility that once out of every 16 trillion zillion gazillion attempts that this might happen. Would you bet on that, or would you bet on the 999.999999999 possibility that there was a form of intelligent designs. And the chapter is full of statistics that I had reviewed by 27 mathematics PhDs that don't say there is a divine being. It just says it's very unlikely that evolution and natural selection at all alone could actually create a fly. Okay? The mathematics work against it. And because of that, I have a view of life and death that is not based on faith. Okay? Because faith gets shaken when you lose a loved one. It's simply based on simple science. If you take the theory of relativity, for example, Einstein tells us time and space are one space-time continuum. All of space and all of time already exists, and that we're working through the space-time continuum along the arrow of time. Right? This is not hocus pocus. This is actual science. We have lots of proof for that. Now, if time doesn't exist, does that mean that Ali was born before me or after me? Does it mean that he died before me or after me? Okay? Or does it mean that Ali's physical form is separate from his non-physical form, and that his physical form is subject to time within the space-time continuum, and that his non-physical form, call it consciousness, call it spirit if you want, exists outside space-time, right? And accordingly is not subject to life and death. Science will tell you that everything we have is based on the Big Bang theory, where a small mass gets compressed and explodes into all of those gases that then, 9 billion years later consolidate into planet Earth, and 4.3 billion years later we start to see life. Interesting. I can believe that. But then quantum physics will tell you, and none of that would have existed unless it was observed by a form of life. Okay, the uncertainty principle, the Copenhagen interpretation, right? Quantum physics will tell you nothing will exist until we observe it. Who observed it, right? Who observed the original mass, the original mass that got compressed and exploded? Who observed the gases? Who observed the Earth? Okay, and who finally observed the molecules that made the first biological life? And somehow, if you see it that way, you realize that death is not the opposite of life. Okay, death is the opposite of birth. So you can think of this life that we live as a video game, a level in a video game. Okay, that level requires a physical avatar to navigate it, and that physical avatar comes to this world, exists in this world through a portal called birth. Okay, and leaves this level of the game through a portal called death. Life existed way before, during, and will exist endlessly after, because eternity is not a long time. Eternity is the absence of time. Okay, and time is a character of this. Very difficult for our physical brains to comprehend that. But if you really understand what Einstein contributed, yeah, it's that very difficult stuff to comprehend that actually constitutes reality. So Einstein himself tells you past, present, and future is nothing more than a stubbornly persistent illusion. Okay? You put all of that together and you suddenly realize that Ali never left. Never left. Okay? Ali's physical form decayed. So will mine, by the way. That's the only certainty you have in life, is that one day my physical form will decay like his, and my non-physical form, my spiritual consciousness, spirit, soul, whatever, will persist exactly where he is. So in a very interesting way, I look at my relationship with Ali when he was alive, is he was the master video gamer. I sat next to him on the red sofa, and we played together, two avatars on that little screen. Okay? That same image is exactly the reality of our souls, sitting on a red sofa somewhere, animating those physical avatars that are navigating this physical world. And then somehow, at a point in time, he puts his controller down. I'm still holding my controller, or maybe he's holding it every now and then because he was a better gamer than I am, right? And yet, while his avatar disappeared from the game, he's still sitting next to my non-physical form. His non-physical form is next to my non-physical form on the red sofa. That's looking at all of this ridiculous video game that we play, and saying, well done, Papa, you're doing really well. You're actually making a difference. No, turn a little left. I said turn left. That's how it goes. So with all of, I know that's a very long answer to a very short question. There is no way you can ever live without pain in your heart for losing a child. But when you really get it, there's absolutely no way you're going to avoid that pain. Every single one of us is with pain. Every single one of us will lose someone they love. The mathematics of it, within 70 years, everyone, maximum 70 years, everyone that ever popped into your life will disappear. Okay? 70, 76, I think, is now life expectancy. Which basically means that death is part of life. It's just part of the video game. Okay? And if you see it that way, you realize that life is what matters. It's not death. Okay? How you navigate this video game until you put your controller down too. That's what matters. And you know, as painful as it sounds, Ali left us 10 years ago and they passed like that. Okay? And yeah, maybe I have 10, 15, 20, 25 more to live. They will pass like that too. Okay? You see, this is the whole idea. If you really anchor yourself in the reality of this illusion that we call a video game, spiritual teachings like Buddhism, for example, will talk about that duality of this world, where someone like me wakes up every morning with no objective, but to make this illusory video game better for everyone. And at the same time, understand that it's just a video game, that this is not really me. This is not really me. My real self is sitting on a red sofa somewhere, observing all of this, unaffected by its ups and downs, by its pains, by its losses. Very, very, very difficult to get your head around it. But when you do, you wake up and you do the absolute best that you can, not really thinking that the game is unfair, because the game is not even here at all.
That loss, you know, for many people, I think debilitates people, you know, the trauma, the loss, especially of a child. Is it societal expectations of grief? Are we taught that this is how we're supposed to feel, and that's why when it happens to us, we feel that? Or is there something underlying?
No, it's this is going to sound really weird. Again, I don't know why I'm talking about the weirdest things today. It feels so hard because you haven't learned yet. So I'll tell you, if you've ever been to Africa, where there are famines that are killing children by the hundreds of thousands, believe it or not, a grieving mother looks at her other two kids and feels grateful that they are alive, not that one has left. Okay, and there is a very, very interesting entitlement that comes with humanity's progress. Okay, we've suddenly thought that we can beat death. Okay, and we of course we somehow, because of the luxuries of modern life, even if you're the poorest person living in London, okay, you still have luxuries that a king of 100 years ago didn't have, right? Because of those luxuries, we cling onto life so viciously. We don't want to let it go. This is not the perception of probably more than 5 billion around the world. I mean, in places like Mexico, there is the Day of the Dead, where they celebrate that those that passed on. In Sufism, when a child dies, his mother holds a wedding party, a party that says, my son has left the suffering of the physical life and is now in the freedom of a life where he's everywhere and part of everyone, as Ali used to say. My own son Ali, when he left us, his mother, very wise woman, went into the intensive care room, kissed him on the forehead, and said, "Habibi, you're finally home." Okay, and she was so right. She was so right. He was not of this world. He felt the suffering of every single being on the planet, right? And now he's finally home. By the way, 40 years earlier than we would have wanted. But what's 40 years? What's 40 years? What matters is that he came, he was so loved. He loved us. He learned so much. He had an incredible life of wisdom, of sharing, and he left. Would 10 more years have made his life better? Maybe, but they would have also made his life miserable. You could have imagined that someone would have showed up in his life and broke his heart, and then he started drinking, right? Why is it counted in numbers? And it's really a very interesting perception that we count life in years. How stupid is that? You count life in living. Life is worth it when you've lived it. And you may have lived it in 10 years or in 20 or in 50 or in 70, or you may live to be 105 and suffered every single day of them. Which is a better life? To me, one of my biggest learnings ever, and I actually only put it in words after he left. You see, your mind is a survival machine. It's supposed to tell you when something goes wrong, not when something goes right. And so for probably 4 years after Ali died, every single morning I would wake up and the first thought that hits me is Ali died. Every single morning, and such a painful thought. Very often I would burst crying, right? Thank you for the break. And then I think a year in, I suddenly realized I'm missing the truth. And the truth is, yes, Ali died. We agree, Ali died. But the truth is Ali lived. And somehow my mind forgets that. I mean, Ali wasn't planned, okay? I told you I wasn't really very excited about kids. And he was the biggest blessing any human being could ever dream of. He shows up, we laugh our heads off, we become best friends, we play video games together, we play music together, we read together, we laugh together. He teaches me what really took me through life, okay? And then he leaves. And instead of me saying, oh my God, I'm so grateful he showed up, which I haven't earned, my mind would say, oh, I'm so pissed off that life took him from me. Since when? You never really had a service level agreement that said he was going to come in the first place. Shouldn't you be grateful for all the times that he spent with you? And so I taught my brain, every time my brain will tell me Ali died, I'll say, yes, brain, you told me like 6,000 times already. We agree he died, but Ali also lived. Okay? When my brain told me Ali died, the only image I constantly had in my mind was him on the intensive care table. Okay? When my brain tells me Ali lived, I remember all of those incredible moments, all of those blessings. And somehow you learn to stop being entitled. Stop being entitled. Life has never signed a service level agreement with you. Okay? You suddenly see the reality that I have done nothing to earn his presence. Okay? I should be dancing in the streets for having him. And yet our brains will say, no, life should have kept him for a week more. And I toyed with that thought experiment. I said, what if life had kept him a week more? Would I have said, yeah, it's fine, you can take him now? No. Okay? If it had kept him 7 years more, would I have said, yeah, fine, I've had enough? No. Okay? There isn't a moment ever where I would have said, I've had enough. Right? So what do I want? The truth is, I want to remember that in those 21 years, this incredible little tiny Zen monk have completely changed my life, have completely made me understand what love is, have completely made me understand what being a father is, has felt my love as much as I felt his, and that he now left, and that another 10 years, 5 days, I don't know, I'll be where he is. Literally, in a snap. We all know that. I don't know how old you are, but your life passed like this, okay? And the remainder of my life will pass like this. And I'll be there too. What matters is what happens between now and then.
Yeah, I completely agree. The interesting thing when you was talking there was, well, all very interesting, but there was a moment where you was talking about you were having this message relayed to you, and you were talking to the brain, you know, to sort of almost like retrain it. And in your book, you speak about this this like blend of neuroscience and computer science. And I'm going to butcher this because I'm not very computer savvy, but this idea of you know, we've got the brain, the computer, and then these things happen to us, like, I don't know if it's like uploading code or putting code onto. What are the things that like affect the way in which we think, feel, have emotions? Like, what are those bits of code? Like, I'm guessing trauma is one of those things, but what else comes in there? And how does it affect?
I think we all have a slightly different operating system. So if you compare computer systems to human minds, the most visible difference is that when you upgrade a computer, you upgrade the software. You install a new operating system. When you upgrade your brain, okay, you're literally reconfiguring the hardware. Most people don't understand that. So what ends up happening is, in your brain, anything that you use is used by connecting a few neurons. Let's just simplify it. A few neurons fire together for you to tap your finger. Okay? If you keep tapping your finger for an hour a day, your brain will say this is a very useful neural network. Those neurons wire together. They become almost a permanent piece of hardware that's available to you all the time, so that your brain doesn't have to re-establish that network every time you tap your finger. It's just available to it all the time. Because you're doing that, you're not going to scratch your ears very much because you're using your fingers to tap them, so the neural network that scratches your ears disappears, right? And because of that, every single one of us humans literally runs on a very different piece of hardware, okay? And that hardware is almost like in the old days when we coded computers before all of the programming languages, is low-level code. It's almost like designing a computer for every human. It's very adaptable as a computer. You can keep changing it, right? But the problem is, if I gave you a belief when you were 6 years old, your brain spends every day that it believes that concept looking for evidence for it. Okay, and so every time a trauma that happens when you're a child, I'm not lovable. Okay, you get a trauma that's called I'm not lovable, and then your brain searches every single morning when you're at school, when you're in the bus station, when you're doing this, when you're doing that, for evidence to prove that concept. Okay, and if you search for something, you find it. And so every time you find it, you're engraving that hardware even more. I'm not lovable, I'm not lovable, I'm not lovable. Okay? And eventually you end up, unable to change it. It becomes part of who you are. It becomes the lens through which you see the world. Now, there are two ways you can deal with this, and I jokingly talk about that because I'm a very serious engineer and my wife Hannah is a very, very, very serious therapist. Okay, and I joke about it all the time because, as an engineer, if you got me your car and it was leaking oil, I would look at it and I would go like, "Oh, hose is broken. Change the hose. Let's move forward." Right? A therapist, on the other hand, will sit you down and say, "Tell me when you bought that car." Okay, how did you drive it in the first couple of weeks? What happened? How did you abuse it? How did the hose break? Okay, both have merit to them. Remember, one of them is saying, we don't really care how the hose broke. Let's make sure that we fix it so that you can move forward. The other will say, but if you fix it and you continue to do the same behavior, you're going to break it again. Okay. Interestingly, both of them, however, are basically trying to find that hardware, okay, that neural network that's completely defining who you are. Now, whenever you find it, whichever way, okay, all that it takes is that you keep trying to repeat actions that are against that neural network. Okay, so if you tell me I'm not good enough, and I start to find ways to show you, I cannot tell you because people don't believe what they're told. They have to be experiencing something. If I keep showing you ways in which you are good enough, okay, if I try explaining to you that, good enough for what? Nobody is good enough for everything. Okay, you're good enough for people who, for example, love simple, intellectual conversations, but you're not good enough for people who want to go out to parties, or vice versa, right? And so, as every time you see evidence unlike your original trauma, you're using a different neural network to verify that. And the more you verify a new neural network, the more you have a different hardware, and the old hardware gets removed. Okay? A therapist, on the other hand, will take you back to the time where that original concept was installed and tell you, oh, hold on. Now look back at that moment. The original engraving of the hardware wasn't necessary at all. Okay? Either way, it takes a very long time to change, which is why change is so difficult. Either way, what ends up happening is that you need to be putting yourself in a different place than your comfort zone, okay? Because once you have neural hardware designs, these become your natural habits. If I told you when you're very good at tapping your finger to try and scratch your ear, you're going to go like, no, hold on, I'm really good at this. Okay, I'm really good at making myself miserable. I'm really good at reminding myself that I'm not good enough. I'm really good at, telling myself that I'm not lovable, and so on and so forth. When you see it that way, suddenly the most annoying concept appears, which is you're in charge. And I know it sounds like a lot of people are going to switch off this conversation now, because what do you mean I'm in charge? Like, life has been so unfair to me. Even if I created those neural networks myself, it was because my dad was an a-hole, right? Yes, but at this moment, okay, if you take that snapshot in time and look forward, if you start changing your neural networks, believe it or not, just like going to the gym, right? So you go to the gym, you get your muscles to fatigue, you feed them with enough protein, you rest, the next morning or the next week you'll be stronger. And you can visibly see it. Similarly, if you take your beliefs and scripts and stories and work through them and verify what's good for you and change your habits, okay, week after week after week after week, you'll be a changed machine. You'll be a changed hardware configuration. You'll see the world differently. And so while it's difficult for some of us to start doing the work and going to the gym, we're still in charge. Because for all of us, unless your body's unable, if you do go to the gym, you'll get results. And so the fact that you don't is your choice, right? I have a tiny little belly now, and it's not tiny so much anymore, but it's a choice, believe it or not. I know what matters to me in life. I know that at this age, I cannot do certain exercises anymore. And I know that at this season of my life, believe it or not, I have things that are so much more important for me. And so I still go to the gym, but not 8 times a week like I did when in my 40s, for example, right? And it's a choice. Now, if you look at me, I'm not going to say that my belly is the result of my age. No, it's not. My little belly is the result of my choice. I'm accountable for that, because believe it or not, I can change my lifestyle and I'll be ripped again, right? And it's actually really, really interesting, because once you're told that, and if you're willing to take that accountability, the rest is hard work. Okay? It's not easy, but I can guarantee you'll get there. And I think that's the one thing that most people forget. That yes, of course, life is going to throw crap at you all the time. Does that mean you have no choice? No. It means it might be a little more difficult for you today than it is for your friend. It will be a little more difficult for them next week than it is for you. But for all of us, it's a bit of challenge to build the right neural networks so that you end up the best version of yourself. Your choice.
The deeper those networks are, I'm guessing the harder they get to sort of rewire. Like,
if you stop using them for 21 days, they'll completely disappear. I'm not completely, but they'll start to disappear.
Okay. Amazing. So, and one of the things I was...
It's very difficult to stop using them, because they're your
So
comfort zone.
yeah.
Right?
So
But if you do, they will.
as we get older, does it become more difficult? People talk about like neuroplasticity. Like, is that as we're getting older, is it harder to rewire, or is that just?
There are different schools of thought around that. Definitely, I can tell you, if I decide to go back to the gym now, it will be much more difficult to get to super fit than it would have been when I was 21. But that's not because of the same reasons. For neuroplasticity, it will work the same way. But because you are so comfortable with habits that you've built over many, many, many longer years, you probably would choose not to change them. Okay, but I'll tell you openly, I change literally every week. Okay, and a lot of people will think of me sitting here in front of you and preaching about all of those things that I figured it out. I haven't. Okay, and I will tell you hands down, my wonderful Hannah and I, when Hannah is incredibly intelligent, but she sees the world from a different angle than I do. And every time we sit together and she highlights something to me, at first I go like, I'm too old for that. But then suddenly I see, yeah, I can actually change something there. Okay, I can change my work style to be a little more productive. I can change my love style to be a little more available. I can. Okay, once I see it, it's not easy to change, but it was never easy to change. But with enough repetitions, it will. Okay, and I will tell people, I normally tell people it's actually quite difficult to do all of it at the same time. So one of the exercises I normally do is I tell people, write down the top 10 things that made you unhappy or stressed last week. Okay? And then rank them in order and focus on one and keep focusing on it until it goes away. Right? When that one goes away, the second one will be so much easier to fix. The third one will be much easier to fix, and so on. Right? But if your biggest issue is fear, okay, because you're always worried and anxious about something, work on what you're afraid of. Okay, try to, and I deal with my brain as a third party. So I basically speak to my brain. My brain says, the future is grim. I go like, okay, like Ali used to treat me. I entertain my brain and I go like, why do you think so? Oh, the economy, this, and the artificial intelligence, that, and blah, 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 blah. I go like, great. Can you now give me evidence for why the future isn't going to be grim? Okay, and my brain goes like, nah, there are none. I'm like, there are some. Can you give me evidence why the world is not going to be grim? And then it would go like, yeah, because you're now old and experienced. It's because now you have a reasonable network of people. Oh, now it's because, this happened actually yesterday in the geopolitics and it changed things. Oh, by the way, because the world has always been grim and we've always been here. So it seems that grim is not, is not a prerequisite to ending the world. It's, we always figure a way out of it. And it will give me a million good reasons if only I force it to do that. Okay, so your brains are designed as a survival machine. So they have the negativity bias that basically tells them, observe what's wrong because it matters to our survival more than what's right. This is why if a tiger shows up in front of us right now, none of us is going to look at it and say, oh my God, so majestic. It is majestic, okay? But you don't say that because your brain wants to say we're going to die, because that's more important than appreciating the beauty of a tiger. Right? We're going to die if a tiger shows up. We're going to die if our boss sends an email. We're going to die, if we're stuck in traffic. Your brain is constantly looking for what's wrong. Teach it to look for what's right, and it will oblige.
The new year is approaching, and as always, Mulligan Brothers is doing its 2025 sale. So if you put the code in on the website, you can get buy one, get one free across the whole range, including the Not a Journal and the Memento Mori poster, an interactive poster that you fill in every single week, and it shows you how much life you've lived and potentially how much you've got left. Then somewhere along there is a square that will be my last square. It might have even been the square that I filled in last week, and I promise you, that fills you with the most motivation to make your life mean something and live with purpose. And the Not a Journal is a journal for just getting stuff done. I know so many of you have loved it, and that's why we've included it in the buy one, get one free with the link below. While stocks last. Once all the journals are gone, that is it, guys. As always, each year we do sell out, so make sure you get your orders in very quick. By purchasing something from the website, you're helping support us going into 2025 to be able to make even more incredible documentaries.
Something I read of yours was happiness is the absence of unhappiness.
Yes.
Do you still believe that?
100%. You see, the issue is we are born happy. Okay? The only way you can change that mood is to trigger a thought in your head that makes you unhappy. Okay? So if I don't remember the name of the test, but I used to do a thought experiment where I would tell people to think of a thought that makes them very unhappy. Okay? And I basically, get them to dwell in it and feel miserable. Yeah, horrible of me to do, but in actual face-to-face workshops, I would say, okay, take a minute now, think about it a little further, and really make yourself miserable. Okay? And then I say, now keep that thought and count the number of white circles that will appear on the screen. Okay? As soon as you start counting the white circles, the unhappiness goes away. Right? I'll tell you openly, as we're speaking right now, when you asked me to talk about Ali, I felt the pain. When you asked me to talk about, neuroplasticity, I wasn't thinking about Ali. I didn't feel the pain of Ali's absence. Right? You have to turn something into a thought, turn that thought into a story, bring it up in your mind, dwell on it to feel unhappy.
Would you liken something like rumination to a virus on a computer?
No, rumination is working for you. So you see, the way I describe the brain sometimes comes across as it's the enemy. It's not. It's your friend gone wild. Okay? So your brain is ruminating for the simple reason that you're not listening.
Okay.
Right? So if I had a friend of mine that would take appointments with her brain. So her brain will go like, oh, my boyfriend did this and he said that and he's annoying. And she would simply say, okay, brain, I got it. You're upset about, my boyfriend. We're going to talk about this at 6:30 after work. And believe it or not, if you just do that, your brain will go like, okay, 6:30 is fine. What do you need now? That report? Let's work on the report. Right? And it happens for all of us. It happens for all of us. If you were thinking about something that really upset you, and then I showed up at the beginning of the filming of the recording and said, hey, good to see you, and you started talking to me, your brain will immediately go like, okay, the guest is here. We're going to keep making ourselves miserable after 2 hours, but for the next 2 hours, focus on the conversation.
I heard of a technique you've mentioned, I can't remember where I heard this, might have even been with Stephen, about, because this is something that's affected me in the past, that idea of a thought coming to your head before you go to bed, you can't sleep, and then offloading that onto a piece of paper.
Absolutely.
And that, I could imagine that to work. I've not tried it, but I could imagine.
So any form of acknowledging. So the example I normally give is, I don't know if you have one of those, but I have quite a few. Friends that wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning, or wake up in California when I'm asleep, and they are so excited about something. So they text me, Mo, I really need to talk to you about this. I ignore them, or I'm asleep, right? So half an hour later, they send and go like, hey, are you available? And then half an hour later, they send again and say, why are you ignoring me? This is important. And then half an hour later, they start to get upset, right? And then I wake up at 8:30, and then I look at my messages and go like, hey, I just woke up. Can I call you in an hour? And as soon as you send them that, they go like, yeah, an hour is good. Thanks, babe. And that's it, right? And once if you do that with your brain, if you just take any specific action that acknowledges to your brain that you've observed the issue and that you're going to work on it, it's done. It's gone. Okay, it's gone for two reasons, by the way. Huh? Even if you imagine like you're telling yourself, I'm going to be late tomorrow because the commute is this. Okay, and then you just tell your brain, hold on, let's sit down and think about how I can make it on time. The unhappiness and worry and anxiety goes away. Why? Because you move your thought from the useful part of your brain to the useful part of your brain. Problem solving is not in the same area of the brain. It's in your prefrontal cortex, right? So when you move the thought to your prefrontal cortex, your brain goes like, okay, I'll focus on solutions now, right? I'm not going to focus on the emotions that are happening in my limbic system. I'm not going to focus on the threats that are happening in my amygdala, and so on and so forth, right? And then suddenly, just by changing your focus, you're suddenly not unhappy anymore. You're fully engaged. The problem is not unsolved, but you're fully engaged in it.
Wow, we could talk about this all day, but there's something that I wanted to go down the route of and make sure that we covered, because I know the audience has probably, a lot of the audience has probably experienced this. It's something that I'm experiencing a lot now. Around 4 months ago, I did this run for charity. It was 480 miles. It was really,
God.
It was a big physical run. I had a stone. So for the first 30 miles, I had a 100-kilo stone on my back. And then the 450 miles over the next 10 days, I had a 30-kilo stone on my back. So we're running through the Scottish Highlands.
I have a stone on my front, but
but you know, for that, I'd been training for 6 months. So there was all this physical stress I was going through for 6 months. Then I did the event 4 months ago. The moment I got back 4 months ago, I've never experienced burnout. And I work like, you know, I do 12, 14-hour days. I've been one of those types of people who've really hustled and, you know, grind and all that kind of stuff. The moment I got back, I have had this tiredness that I could just not shake. And it could be, I'll walk into my office and I run the business, and people come at me with all these stressors, and then all of a sudden this tiredness hits over my face. I'll go into the gym, I'll lift the weights for the first time, this tiredness hits over me. And I wanted to ask you about like burnout and if the body deciphers stress from emotional stress, physical stress, mental stress, like, and I know this is a subject that you've explored a lot recently. So yeah, I'd love to just.
It's quite interesting that you say that. So unstressable, believe it or not. So my last book with Alice Law, we wrote it together. Is such a joy for me to have written, because it's a very unusual book for what I normally work on. And the difference is between Alice and I, if you want, we're the yin and yang of the topic. Like we both struggled with a very, very stressful life, but we approached it in a very different way. Okay. And I'll admit openly, my number one strength is mental stress. So I can easily work through thoughts and stories that my brain tells me. Alice is fantastic at physical, emotional, and spiritual stress. And so it's quite interesting when you really think about what you've done to your body. Physical stress is your body's stress language, if you want. It basically wants to tell you something that you've done here is not good for me. Okay? Now, why is it not good for me? Because the reason why we have cortisol to start, that stress hormone, is a scenario that's very unlike the modern world. Okay, in the ancient worlds, a tiger would show up, your amygdala would detect it before your prefrontal cortex recognizes it. You'd get a hormone cocktail in your body that eventually releases cortisol and adrenaline sometimes, right? And that basically puts you in a state of it reconfigures your body in a way that's superhuman. Okay, so it gives you the ability to do things that you could never imagine doing. Whether there are recorded cases of mothers being able to lift a car from to get their children saved or whatever, all the way to being able to create a presentation that is going to change your career or whatever. Problem is, in the original configuration of cortisol and stress, think of the movie The Hulk, right? You're supposed to get that cortisol hit long enough to get you out of danger, and then it phases away. You can see that in nature very, very, very clearly. That there was a wonderful book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, right? You can see animals, a deer out in the wild would see the tiger, would pop out of its place, run like mad, and if it escapes the tiger, literally 6 seconds later, it stops, it shakes its body, continues to eat grass as if nothing happened. That's not what we do. So in the modern world, and especially with 480 freaking kilometers, okay?
Miles. Yeah.
Miles. You're basically telling your body, we're going to need that cortisol for a very long time, okay? And of course, cortisol can save you, but it also destroys it increases your levels of inflammation in the body. It basically increases your exhaustion level. It reconfigures you, okay? And extended stress, basically, I don't think what you're suffering from is burnout.
Okay.
I think what you're suffering from is a very is a prolonged physical stress. Okay, I had one of those. So the way Alice and I wrote Unstressable is quite interesting, because we would sit down and discuss structures, and then each of us would go and write, and then we would edit each other's work. And so when I read her work, she wrote the physical stress chapter. When I read her work, I called her. I said, Alice, are you making fun of me? Like, this entire chapter is about me. Okay? I have every symptom, every habit, every pain, every ache. Okay? Every one of them is in me. And she said, yeah, I've been telling you for a while. So I said, what should I do? And she said, start with inflammation. And so I did actually something amazing. I was about to start my silent retreat in 2022. And I normally disappear for 40 days in silence, which is really, really, it really takes your stress away. But I also ordered an anti-inflammatory meal plan. And so for 40 days, I basically ate an anti-inflammatory food. Very, very little amounts, very healthy. And I had never felt better. Aches, pains, muscles, joints, digestive system, gone. Okay? And I really think the question with physical stress is, are we listening to it? Okay? And basically residual stress needs to be treated by the opposite behavior of what caused it. So you really need to find a way for you to unrun 480 miles. Okay? Now, the thing I want to say, and I'm not a doctor here, is why do we do that shit? And I say that with tons of respect for you. But I never understood it. First of all, why 480? Okay? Second of all, why a stone? Right? And third, and I really never understood that about Western cultures. If someone wants to donate to charity, why do they need you to run? Okay? And if you want to run, why do you want to tell people to donate to charity? And if you want to tell people to donate to charity, why do you have to run? I never understood any of that. Okay? I mean, in reality, if it was a worthy charity, you should just pick up the phone, call all your friends and say, guys, this is truly a worthy cause. We should all contribute to it. We're contributing for the cause, not because of my physical fitness. Okay? And then you go and say, and hey, by the way, I'm going to be running, cheer me up. Right? And that's it. The truth is, we do things in the modern world that I have to say are ridiculous. I love that you can do this. And I feel a bit of envy that I can't. Okay? But I never got it. I never get why we stress ourselves with synthetic stress. Okay? So one of my favorite bosses in my entire life was my first boss at Google, who was a very shrewd business person. Okay? And every January, by the end of January, because we're still coming from holidays, everyone is running a little, speeding up and so on, he would apply so much stress on the business, okay, that everyone would be about to burn out or break down. And I walked into his office the second year and I said, look, I have enough business stress in my region. I don't need any of your synthetic stress. Don't apply artificial stress on me just to speed me up. Okay? And we had this crazy argument, not fight, but argument, where he said, I'm pushing you for your own good. And I said, when I miss my target, fire me, right? Just don't stress me on my path to my target. And somehow he loved that argument. So a week later, we were in a very big conference and he, someone said, why is Region 4 not doing what we're doing here in Region 1? And he said, well, I have no idea how Mo achieves his targets, but the day he misses them, I'm going to fire him. Right? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'd rather do things the way that makes me feel fulfilled and enriched and, play to my strengths. And if I fail, fire me. That's a much better experience than stressing the hell out of me, making me miss my targets because I'm stressed, and then firing me anyway. Right? And it is really an interesting question. Why do we stress ourselves synthetically? Okay? Now, you spoke about burnout. And burnout is almost the opposite side of the concept. It's the same result. We stress ourselves because we don't realize that it matters. So there are two very big issues in the modern world. One of them is we wear stress as a badge of honor. Okay? We tell the world I'm busy because I'm busy means I'm important. Means you should date me because I'm busy. Look at me, I'm busy. I'm someone. Okay? When in reality, I think the most successful people are not busy at all. I used to work 4 hours a day when I was at Google. Okay? And on days where I worked more than 4 hours, I was really critical. Maybe I was doing something wrong. Because I had teams that were doing a lot of things. I'm not supposed to be the one, completely submerged in work all the time. Right? As a writer today, if I worked 12 hours a day, okay, something's wrong. As a writer today, as we were saying before we started recording, the best thing I can do is do nothing. Because if I do nothing for half an hour, I get inspired to write about something, right? So somehow we push ourselves to burnout because we think that this makes us more successful or more worthy. The second is because the trick around burnout is that none of the things that are burning you out on their own are capable of breaking you. Okay? Burnout is not one big stress that breaks you. This is known as trauma. Burnout is a bunch of stresses, okay? Tens, hundreds of them that are piling up, okay? All of them are tiny. You can handle each of them. You can handle 20 of them at any point in time. None of them are going to break you. So you say, fine, I don't mind the crazy commute. I don't mind the loud alarm in the morning. I don't mind working another half an hour. I don't mind this. I don't mind that. None of them will break you on its own, but you add them all up. And then your partner shows up and says, hey, baby. And you go like, don't hey me. Like, really, I cannot take anymore. And you break down, right? So when you're looking at burnout, the answer to burnout is actually quite interesting. It's not to remove the stressors that are important. If you have an important project, absolutely, work on it, right? It's to remove the unnecessary, unwarranted pressures. Okay, it's to sit with yourself next Saturday and say, I'm going to write down every single thing that stressed me last week. That comment I saw on YouTube, that email I got from my boss, that commute that was very rushed, that. Write every single one of them. And then take a red pen and scratch out the ones that you'll never are going to let happen again. Okay, from the simplest one, if your alarm clock in the morning is very loud, find another soothing sound to it, okay? And yes, it's not gonna break you, but it's just a very bad introduction to the day. Even better, if you can, after you set a nice soothing alarm, sleep early, so that by the time it's about, I don't actually remember the last time I woke up to an alarm. I honestly don't. I had an appointment, a visa appointment today in the morning. I needed to wake up at 6:30. Right? Yeah, I set an alarm, but the alarm doesn't go off. Why? Because I sleep enough before it. And then when it's about time for the alarm to go off, I'm awake already. Right? So you can do those things. You can tell yourself, if swiping on Instagram seems to be enriching you, but it's killing you every time and it's stressing you, scratch it out with a red pen and visibly look at it and say, I'm not going to add this to my life next week. And you'll very quickly realize you could remove 20, 30 stressors of your life every single week. That annoying friend that only tells you negative things, that, social media person that you're following that's creating misery into your life, whatever. And once you do that, burnout, the big projects will remain there. They will remain stressing you, but the little ones will go away and you'll have a lot more spare capacity to deal with.
People who are in business and entrepreneurship and all this kind of stuff, they struggle with these concepts, like these things you're talking about. And I believe them to be true. Like, I think what you're singing here is correct. If somebody was, let's say let's reframe it, they're pursuing something they find worthy, to make a billion people happy. At the start, let's say they're starting from nothing. At the start, do they have to work hard? Do they have to?
No.
Okay.
100% not. Look, they all do. And I did too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the hard thing, is looking outward towards you. Is like, if I were to take the opposite opinion, it would be like, well, it's easy for you to say because you've been there. It's not easy.
But isn't that why people always ask for someone who has seen other things to be their consultant or mentor or whatever. The truth is this. The truth is, I've co-founded 28 startups, right? I will promise you, the problem with a startup founder is not that it's supposed to be shitty, okay? It's that they think they need to get 100% of everything correct for it to succeed, okay? And the reality is only 15% of everything that will ever surface in your day matters, okay? The problem is because you're not experienced enough to tell which 15%, you address everything. And what does that mean? It means you distribute your bandwidth over 100 things instead of 15. And so each of them gets less attention, including the 15. Okay? And then that things become even more stressful. So I always ask people, if people ask for my business recommendations, I say, choose what it is you're going to work on before you choose how much time you're going to dedicate to it. Right? And most of the time, 95% of all things don't matter. I'm filming a documentary, for example, and our producer is highly organized, right? And so there are so many plans over layers, over contingencies, so that I show up exactly at 9:20, at 8:30 for a 9:30 filming. I'm not going to do that, okay? I'm going to show up at 9:15. That's enough buffer. Right? And by the way, because I showed up at 9:15 and I didn't have to wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning, I'm going to do better at 9:30, right? And of course, her view and her task and her job is different than mine. Her task is to make me show up on time. My task is to make me show up feeling great, completely organized, in my head, rested, relaxed, okay? And it's up to me. I'm the founder. So I can follow and say, oh yeah, absolutely. Let's not wake up at 5:30. Let's wake up at 4. Let's show up at 8. That's even more sure. Why? Okay. I get the choice to say, no, I'm going to be there at 9:15. It's going to be perfect at 9:30 and life is fine. Right. And most startup founders, most anyone who is motivated by a passion forgets that. You forget that I would write a better book if I wrote one book rather than write 3. I would write a better book if I wrote a book that was 8 chapters, not 80. Okay? I would write a better book if I actually listened to and learned about specific concepts very deeply, not spread myself across every view of that concept. Right? There is enormous value to choosing what it is you're going to dedicate your life to. And most of us don't do that. And then we blame life for being busy.
I mean, I'm guilty for this completely. Like I've always thought and grown up with the idea of hustle is my advantage, working harder than absolutely everybody else was my advantage. And it has worked for me at times.
It does sometimes, yeah.
But you hit a ceiling, and I think that's once you get to that point, like you need to start thinking differently. And I think a lot of our audience is struggling with that transition into that different type of thought process.
It's all about an honest view of what's bringing 85% of your impact, okay? And an honest view. So you basically tell yourself, nothing is going to be addressed. Maybe I'm going to delegate it and someone else is going to address it. I don't, by the way. I normally literally stop it, okay? And if you know that it fits within the 85% of impact, put your whole heart in it. And some weeks you're going to have to work 14-hour days. Other weeks you're not going to have to work at all. And acknowledge to yourself that on the weeks where you don't have to work at all, it's okay. You don't have to be busy to be successful.
This idea, my partner, she started introducing me to this idea. And it absolutely transformed everything for me. Like I could spend 30 minutes to an hour on the most important 85% and transform the business, tenfold compared to what I was doing, just run around like a headless chicken.
100%. And because you suddenly get that helicopter view. I mean, if you don't mind me saying, even more valuable is doing nothing at all. So I used to, within Google X, so Google X, we had this beautiful building where everything was inside. All of the meeting rooms were made of glass. And so, I used to have in my calendar what I in my calendar wrote as thinking time. But twice a day, I would have 30 minutes in one of those meeting rooms, okay, sitting there seen by everyone walking by, doing absolutely F all, nothing. Like no phone in my hand, no paper and pen, nothing on the wall. I'm not attending a meeting. Okay. And then people see me sitting there doing absolutely nothing. And then they start to open the door, and I'll go like, I'm sorry, I'm busy. Busy with what? With nothing. And believe it or not, in that half an hour, 6 to 8 times, I hold a pen and I write some of the most profound things that we need to do that would flip a project upside down. I mean, even in work itself, my teams will always tell you, they would walk in and say, we have a pipeline of 18 deals. And I sit and listen, and then I say, okay, look, I'm interested in deal 1 and 7. Don't talk to me about the others again. And they go like, what do you mean? You know, the others combined are like $4 billion. And I'm like, yeah, those two are $4 billion too. They are much more promising. And that's all I care about. You want to put your life in the rest? I'm fine. But don't lose 1 and 7. Okay? And I'm, you know, and if you want to put your life in the rest, fine. But I'm going to put my life in 1 and 7. That's it. And if I can put my life in 1 and 7, I'm closer to the client. I am way more dedicated. I'm way more able. I'm way more aware. Okay? And I'm way more energetic to serve that need properly. And I'm honest with the other clients to say, hey, by the way, this is really important, but I cannot do it now. Can I do it, you know, in 3 weeks' time? Simple.
That way of thinking, I think, as well as a startup founder, somebody who's, you know, beginning business, you're so macroed in, like you're so close to it. Having that helicopter view is like
absolutely
the most refreshing perspective once you eventually.
So remember when we spoke about burnout? As a startup founder, believe it or not, this is one of your top practices, is to sit down at the end of every week and say, which clients am I going to fire? Okay, which tasks am I going to stop doing? Because they're taking a lot of my energy and they're not giving me ROI, right? And believe it or not, there are those clients that show up, ask for your time, complain all the time, negotiate everything, make everything horrible, and drain the hell out of you. If you fire them, you'll make a lot more money. If you simply tell them, oh, you don't fire them like, oh, you know what, I don't want to work with you anymore. The next time they ask you for a difficult task, you go like, I'm really sorry, I don't think my organization is capable of doing this. Why don't you go to my competitor? That's a really good idea. Like, go to my competitor, go with all of your crap. I'm very, very delighted to hand you. Do you want their contacts? Right? It's really, really the smart thing to do. I think fear makes us not want to miss out on any opportunity.
Yeah.
And by engaging in all of them, we end up missing out on all of them.
I also think, as you're saying this, and I'm thinking, if like me doing 4 or 5 hours, I know that good would come from that. You know, the idea of, especially as like doing artistic work, like filmmaking or
absolutely.
writing, you know, those creative elements massively help. But also the idea of giving up that addiction almost sounds so difficult.
It is difficult, but everything worthwhile is.
Here's the other interesting thing that I see quite a lot is people working, you know, 12, 14-hour days, but then when they do burn out, they're out for weeks.
100%.
And they're destroyed. And if they're just being efficient with their time, they could continue that consistently.
I think you really need to compare high performers to Formula One cars. Okay? You're constantly trying to tune the car. Not for every race, for that one race. Right? And by the way, you know for a fact that you overtune it. If you overtune it, you're going to have an accident and lose the race. Right? It's all about truly and honestly. So I'm old, but I constantly look at myself and say, that wasn't efficient. You could have done that differently. That wasn't joyful. You could have done that differently. That wasn't justified. You could have done that differently. Okay? You know what? The only asset I have in life is my time. That's the only thing that I come to this world with. Okay? And if I put the time in horrible things, and I remember the idea of 18 clients and I'm only interested in 1 and 7, and most of the time my head of sales or country manager or whatever would go like, but 1 and 7 will take us a day a week to work on. Like, we can also work on the others. And I would normally say, no, go have a cup of coffee with your people. It's more valuable than working on the others. It's so interesting how more is not better.
I agree. And it's so hard to, you know, wind that thinking back. And it's really difficult.
Fear is very difficult.
Yeah.
You're afraid that if I lose one maybe it's better to have a portfolio approach. When I was a stock trader in my young years, it really puzzled me. They'll tell you, you need to have a portfolio of 16 stocks so that if some of them, lose and some of them win, you're okay. And I'm like, why do I buy the ones that lose? Why don't I just buy the ones that win?
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like, because you don't want to put in the effort to really study deeply and make sure that you did your homework, just buy a few and gamble and everything will be fine. Mathematics will help you.
You know what's so funny is I've just had this conversation with my brother. I don't know if you're into crypto, but I had this same conversation. I spoke about just research one really, really well instead of having a mixed bag. So I've used that philosophy for like 8 to 10 years now, but I don't in my business at all. In my business, I'm like, I need as much as possible, as much safety nets as possible. But yeah, I know it's bad thinking. Like
it's not at all. It's typical of your energy level.
Yeah.
You're running another 480 miles. There's a little shortcut here. I don't say that with, I'm saying that with a lot of love.
Yeah.
There is a shortcut here that's 4.8 miles.
Yeah.
Just take that.
So I want to go back to the 480 miles because this is, again, I'd love to know your perspective from the sort of the idea, the way you perceive the brain to be. And it's a bit left field because I say I ran for charity. There was another reason. So my son was stillborn about 8 or 9 years ago. This is when we started Mulligan Brewers. And I had this idea that I struggled with grief. And I had this idea I wanted to do something for him in honor of him. But I just couldn't. I couldn't process the grief very well. Struggled with it. We did this. That helped quite a lot. But I had this idea that I was going to do this run or, just something to be able to physically process whilst I was trying to emotionally process the grief. And we're in Scotland and I saw this stone by the side of the road. And I don't know what possessed me, but I was like, I want to carry that back for him, for his headstone, and raise money for bereaved parents. But the reason I've really started to look into it a lot recently is because it's the first time ever I found extreme peace in Jacob's grief. When I got back, I thought I was going to be crying and really emotional. And when I arrived at his graveside with a headstone, I was just at complete peace and rest with it. So I started to look into pilgrimages and, these sort of spiritual pilgrimages and stuff like that. And I'm curious is like the idea of the brain and rewiring it and processing grief and stuff like that. Can you see anything there with the idea of doing a pilgrimage or?
I do quite a few.
Okay.
And as I said, my biggest ritual is the 40 days silent retreat every year. There is, your mind will go where you allow it to go, okay? Or will go where you force it to go. And, you take something that we know works like meditation. And meditation is normally in spiritual cycles focus on your breathing because breathing is life, they say. No, it's basically focus on something other than thought. Okay, focus on a mechanical, monotonous movement of the flame of a candle, or focus on your breathing, or focus on your steps, or focus on the beauty of a flower. Okay. And it's quite interesting because your brain ticks like a computer. So every tick, it will do an instruction. And so it's, when people tell you that when you meditate, you quiet your brain, you don't. Your brain will never stop creating a thought on every tick. Okay? It just creates a thought that's non-harmful. Okay? A thought that's calm and peaceful. A thought that is actually, interestingly, in the real world. So you and I share an experience, and when I think of Ali, I have to bring the memory of Ali, which really is just electricity in my memory, to the front of my brain, and create a story that's not happening right now. That story could be, we played video games together, it's a joyful story. Or that story is, he was on the intensive care stairs, a table, it's a painful story. Or that story could be, I drove him to that hospital, it's a story of guilt, and so on. Okay? But you have to bring it to life on those ticks of your brain. And when you do, you feel the pain. When you do, you give it life. So it's quite interesting, huh? That we experience life equally as what we see right here, right now, and as what we create in our head. So for many of us who have not been at 9/11, in the World Trade Center in New York, we've lived that story because it was played so many times on CNN, and we saw it over and over and over and over. And your brain is able to create, sort of your experience of it. Okay, that's why I never watch horror movies, for example, because I think life is scary enough sometimes. I don't need to put myself in a story that's not even real. When you take long runs, or you take time in nature, or you take time alone, or you just skip that pace, you're basically giving your brain the space to say, let me focus on something else. And when you focus on something else, believe it or not, you leave that story that happened 9 years ago. And that's when you feel the peace, right? Suddenly you say, you know what? I've been pondering that story for 9 years. It's been running over and over and over in my head, and nothing has changed. I'm still here putting a headstone, right? And then somehow you settle. Somehow you go like, okay, maybe I shouldn't give that story more of my headspace anymore. And there are so many ways you can get to that. My view is that my brain owes me a good story for every bad story. As a matter of fact, it owes me 9 good stories for every bad story. So I have a very, very clear deal. I actually call it the contract. Okay, if my if my head says something like, this chair is, it's not, but if my head says this chair is not comfortable, okay, which could be true, I'll say, but it's elegant, okay, but it's close enough to you, but it is, in a lovely surrounding, but the lighting of the studio is fantastic around it, okay, but at least I'm sitting down, and many other things. And you can literally, if you force yourself to go out of its negativity bias, you'll create a very different story. The problem is, I think, for some of us, I do that in my silent retreat, you do that running, okay? For some of us, we do that meditating, whatever. But if you can get yourself into that space where you tell yourself the real story, or you stop creating that stream of thought that creates a story, the illusion goes away.
I completely accidentally did what you did. I'm just thinking back to it. I'd said at the start of the run that I'm going to attach Jacob to this run, and I'm going to think about all the good things that are in my life because of this, and what happened, and all the positive things. Whereas before, I'd go to his graveside, and I had this thing about going to his graveside every week, and I'd think about how much it hurt me and how bad it was that he was buried there and how difficult it had been. And I turned that round through the run but you're probably
it's funny, isn't it, that nothing is really good or bad. That's really quite interesting. Some things are painful, okay, but good or bad is a flux in time. Some things will feel bad at first and then feel good afterwards. Some things will feel good at first and then feel bad afterwards. Some things are good and bad at the same time. Some things are neither. But nothing, you can never call anything good or bad. It's quite interesting when you really think about it.
Just to wrap this up, and I hope we can pick this up again sometime, because I'd love to.
I really enjoyed it, so thank you.
It's been a wonderful conversation. Where would you direct people? If somebody's watching this video right now, where they can sort of follow on from this conversation and maybe dive deeper into your teachings or lessons?
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
No, thank you for your time.
I'm on social media. Instagram is the place where I respond most. I hate all of it. But yes, you can find me there. YouTube is where I put most of my good thoughts, if you want. So you'll find them always under some kind of Mo Gawdat, Mo_Gawdat, Mo space Gawdat, Mo.Gawdat, whatever. And so this is one. The other one is a very interesting initiative I'm doing this year is Unstressable, the membership. So Unstressable my book with Alice was a Sunday Times bestseller, did really, really well. It really helped quite a few, tens of thousands of people. But now we're building a community that we tested last year that's called unstressable.com, that's coming out at the beginning of the year in its new format. And we've found that having a community around stress is very, very different than just knowing the knowledge. So it's not just a training platform where you have all of that Alice and I teach, but it's actually a community where we meet for webinars and discuss and so on. So that's a place I'd like to invite a lot of people to come to. I am available, actually, I don't know how to say that because it's your podcast, but I do a lot of effort on other podcasts so that I spread the message. In my mind, I think the most important thing that I do is when you give me the honor of being on your platform, I can spread a few thoughts that are actually quite different than what I discussed on other platforms. So if you search for Mo Gawdat,
there's some great episodes out there as well. Specifically, the Stephen one was.
I did a few. I did a few with Dario, the CEO. I did a few with Elizabeth Day. There are quite a few actually. But what I ask, if you find value in what I shared, is please share it with others. I'm really not looking for any return from it. But I think if you share it with two people and they share it with two people, eventually Ali will be everywhere and part of everyone. So I'd really appreciate that.
Lovely. Thank you for all the time today. I really appreciate it. Yeah.